Hi, everyone. Good evening and welcome to tonight's webinar. I would like to welcome you to Portal Power, DCR's License Portal Process webinar. This is hosted by the City of Los Angeles Department of Cannabis Regulation, and my name is Courtney Lang. Just to cover some housekeeping this evening before we get started, let's take a moment to review some of the rules. So this webinar is being recorded, so please note that it will be available and for viewing after editing process on DCR's LMS system for verified social equity individuals. You will be muted with cameras off for the duration of the webinar. This means that your camera and audio functions will not be available to you during the session. However, you will be able to see and hear all the panelists, which is just me this evening. There is an open chat box where you can interact with one of our administrators, and that's a way to network with also the other participants on this webinar. So you can comment and ask for more information there. Please caution when sharing personal information in a public forum and keep your questions focused on tonight's topic. Also, please ask questions about tonight's subject matter in the Q&A box. We will gather those questions and responses, and we'll, throughout the presentation, we'll be collecting those, and then during the Q&A session at the end, we'll be able to respond to those. The Q&A session will be about 15 minutes. Then you are encouraged to utilize the Q&A box at the bottom pane of your Zoom screen. If you use the Q&A box for questions, everyone will be able to see the questions when they are answered. Let's see. So finally, we just wanted to make a note here that the content is presented. It's not presented by the Department of Cannabis Regulation for the City of Los Angeles and is for informational purposes only. This information is subject to change and does not replace or supersede the Los Angeles Municipal Code, nor constitute legal advice. If you have specific questions outside of tonight's topic, please call 213-978-0738 during business hours, Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., and you can speak to a DCR representative. So we're going to get started with the presentation. Again, tonight's presentation is on the DCR licensing portal process. And you're here tonight because you decided to enter the emerging cannabis industry, which is really exciting. However, there are a lot of special certifications and licenses, and there are a lot of steps to get through the process and get your ticket to operate. So in this webinar, we're going to guide you on how to get registered and started in the first steps of cannabis licensing in the City of Los Angeles. Many of you have probably already utilized the DCR's licensing portal to initially verify that you were eligible as a social equity individual applicant. So regardless, today we're going to show you how to register on the portal. You need to register more than just as an individual. You need to register as a business. And most of you probably haven't used the portal yet to submit applications. So we'll basically go through the dashboard and help you navigate that process as well. So we've gone through the welcome remarks. The rest of the agenda for tonight is we'll talk about some general licensing information. We will review the Excella account types and identification numbers, which you want to keep handy as you're going through the application process. And then we will also talk about the Excella account registration process and account management, application records, and resources. And then we'll go on to the question and answer. So moving on to the general information, we just wanted to get started and have everybody on the same page with some of the general information for licensing. So to start off, a local license is required to engage in commercial cannabis activity within the City of Los Angeles. So many of you are aware that a state license, an annual state license is required. And then in addition, you also have a local annual license that's required. So you need to have both of those to operate in the City of Los Angeles. Second, the Los Angeles Department of Cannabis Regulation, who is responsible for issuing commercial cannabis licenses in the city of LA, only accepts applications online through the licensing portal, which is also known as Excella. That's another name you might hear throughout this webinar, or you may have heard in other webinars or conversations about DCR's licensing process. So again, they all have to be submitted online. You cannot submit any paper applications, unfortunately. The other piece is applicants must have a compliant business premise location identified and landowner authorization in order to begin the local licensing application process. So again, the first thing you need to make sure that you have in order to begin the application process on the licensing portal is really your land, your business premise. And again, you'll have your registration as an individual started already, but in order to get your application for your business going, you're going to need to start off by having your compliant premise and authorization from that landowner. Some more general licensing information. It's good to know that the DCR is currently accepting new applications from the general public and from social equity individual applicants for distribution, non-volatile manufacturing, cultivation processor licenses, as well as testing labs. So those applications are available to the general public and to social equity individual applicants. Then there are specific licenses available only to social equity individuals, and those license types are delivery micro businesses, as well as cultivation nursery. Some more here, DCR is not currently accepting applications for retail, cultivation, and volatile manufacturing. And then the DCR licensing portal, there's a lot of things that you'll need to go through on the local level, like building permits. You'll need to get a business tax registration certificate. All of those are not going to be used. You're not going to apply for them on DCR's licensing portal. This DCR licensing portal is really just used for the cannabis application. And so again, just to reiterate, the DCR licensing portal is not going to be used for your building permit application. It will not be used for a certificate of occupancy, a business tax registration certificate, or your state license application. Those are all other applications that you're going to need to apply for locally or at the state level, and they have their own separate portals that you'll have to create usernames and passwords for. So if you're like me, you have a specific Word document where all your passwords live or somewhere safe, you'll need that for this process, that's for sure. So I'm going to link to application resources for these specific items at the end of the presentation, just so you know there will be a place so that all those can live. What will this licensing portal be used for? Okay, so the licensing portal, the applicants and licensees will use this for account registration. So as an individual, you'll need to create an account. Entities will also need to create an account. This is also going to be used to create your legal business entity record for this application. So we've got the pre-application review is going to be submitted through the portal, as well as temporary approval application, annual license application, application modifications, public convenience and necessity requests, and you'll also pay all of your annual cannabis license fees for the city of LA through this portal. So some licensing resources for you before we get started. It's really important that before you get started on using the portal and before you get started on your licensing process and journey, that you make yourself familiar with all the resources available that the city of LA has produced. So the commercial cannabis activity license application procedures require you to follow very specific procedures, use very specific forms and documents that are associated with each step that we just mentioned on that last webinar, or sorry, on the last slide. Please review the information beforehand. I'm going to show you This is a link to all of the application procedures and resources for each part of the process. So if you follow this link, it'll show you on the webpage pre-application procedures and documents and forms, temporary application procedures, documents, forms. It's all listed out really straightforward for you. And right now what I'm going to do is just take a closer look at an example of the resources that are available for each step in the process. So we'll start here by looking at the pre-application review workflow. So again, there's a workflow chart for pre-application, there's a workflow chart for the temporary approval process, and there's a workflow chart for application modification, etc. So each part of the process has their own workflow chart that looks like this, that'll walk you through the specific steps that an applicant needs to take to complete, as well as what the DCR has to do to complete the process. This is a flow chart, really. It's got the 2 tracks for you. And it's really helpful in a high-level overview of the step-by-step process that the DCR requires to get through pre-application. The next thing, again, this is an example of a resource that's available for pre-application, and then there's a very similar looking document for temporary approval, application modifications, etc. And this basically, it follows along with the workflow chart, and it provides even more detail of what is involved in each of those steps. So this, again, this is the information and procedure bulletin, and there's one that exists for each step of the application process. And it provides detailed information to complement each step that's outlined in that bulletin or in the workflow that we just looked at. The third resource that I want to make sure everyone knows about is the application forms and documents tab on DCR's website. So here you can find all of the required forms, a link to all the required forms, and it'll also link to the workflow chart and the bulletin that I just showed you for each process, each part of the process. So here you see pre-application review forms and documents, and underneath it, it has the workflow chart that we just looked at. It has the bulletin that we just looked at, and there's only one form for pre-application. So this lists that one form that you're going to be required to submit for pre-application. And if I were on the website, I'd scroll down and show you that each of the other steps in the process, you've got the similar list of resources available to you. So we took a glance at pre-application today, and temporary approval, application modifications, and some other parts of the licensing process are all available on the website here. So really quick, let's review what we just took a look at. We've got the Los Angeles Cannabis Department of Cannabis Regulation only accepts license applications online through the licensing portal, which is also known as Excella. You must have a compliant business location with landowner authorization to begin the local license application process. The DCR is currently accepting new applications from the general public and social equity individual applicants for distribution, non-volatile manufacturing, cultivation, processor licenses, and testing labs. And for SEIAs only, for social equity only, the delivery license, the delivery micro business license, as well as cultivation nursery types are currently being accepted. The DCR licensing portal is not used for building permit applications, certificate of occupancies, business tax registration certificates, or state license applications. All of those must be applied for and obtained before operating, but you're going to need to submit those through separate licensing or separate application portals, and we'll provide the resources for those at the end of this presentation. And last, the city's commercial cannabis activity license application procedures require applicants and licensees to follow specific procedures and use specific forms and documents associated with various application steps. And as an applicant, I would advise that you take a look at those, review them, print them out, have them handy as you're getting ready to prepare your applications, as you're submitting the applications. it'd be really good to have obviously the bulletin and the workflow handy, but the links to the forms and documents you're going to want to utilize as well, because you need to use specific detailed forms. Okay, so our next section here is talking about account types and IDs. So first up, let's talk about account types, also known as contact types. Prior to applying for a license, a user profile must be created on the DCR's licensing portal for the entity and any individual, which is also known as a natural person, any individual that's associated with the license application. So a business entity, what entities do you need to register? Anything, if you're going to have it be listed as the applicant, the business entity as the applicant, you would obviously need to register that business entity on Excella, on the license portal. And so a lot of times that's the main owner of the application. And so you'll need to have that business entity registered. And if there are any other entities that are listed as like a part owner, so you've got your business entity that holds the license, and then you may have a business entity that owns 50% of that license. So that would be an example of another business entity that would need to have its own account registered for on the portal. And then individuals, any natural person associated with the business entity applying for the license would need to be registered as well. So this would be anybody that holds ownership in the company, anybody that's representing the business, anybody such as like a CEO that's holding like a director's position. Those folks will have to be identified on the license, and they'll also have to have an account registered with the city. Next, let's talk about the contact reference ID. This one's important. I'm sure you probably already have a contact reference ID and you've been required to provide it to the city, or in some case where someone's trying to help you out to figure out something on the licensing portal for you, or figure out finding some records for you. The contact reference ID is what is also known as the Excella contact reference ID. So when you create an entity or an individual account, it will generate a unique Excella Citizens Access contact reference identification number. So the Excella Citizens Access, ACA, is an acronym used for that. And then contact reference identification number is used or shortened as contact reference ID. So an ACA contact reference ID is the long form of this term. And anyhow, you'll need that to keep it handy throughout the licensing process when you're working with a licensing analyst or someone on your application. It's often they'll ask for your contact reference ID. And so I keep that handy where my passwords are. I'll usually just put that reference ID number next to whatever my username and password is for the account. And it comes in handy a lot. So on this slide, you'll see is this is a link to help you keep track of this information. I don't have a screenshot of this form, but this form is really helpful because it's going to help you understand what business entities are you going to need to create a Excella ID for, and what individuals are going to need to create an Excella ID. So it can be confusing, especially when we're just talking about this on this webinar about who needs to create it. It's a little bit vague, but this form is super handy. And obviously I use it with anybody that I'm helping to submit an application for. And again, it'll go through and help you identify what business entities are going to need an Excella ID or an account on the licensing portal. And it's also going to let you know what individuals, what people are going to need to have a portal login. So let's see, in the next section, not in the next couple of slides, but in the next section, I am going to show you where you can identify your contact reference ID. It's once you're on your dashboard. So we'll show you that a little bit later on, just FYI. Okay, so to review, once again, we want to quickly just make sure the key takeaways are clear. So there are two account types. There's one for the individual and one for the entity. Prior to applying for a license, a user profile must be created on the DCR licensing portal for the entity and any individual. Again, most of you have probably already started with the individual contact with creating one for you as a person. And I don't recommend necessarily creating one for a business entity until you're ready to move forward. Once you have the finances and your entity started and you've got your business location, or at least you've got a letter of intent started to get your lease going, something like that. Once you're really sure you're about ready to get started, that's when I would say go ahead and start the business entity process. And then obviously we want to keep that contact reference ID handy, whether it's for you as an individual or your entity. That form that I showed you, it will not only allow you to identify who needs to create an account on Excella, but it has a tab for you to put the ID number for each of those people. So it's useful after you create those accounts. It'll help you organize for the future as well. So we're ready to move on. This next section, we're going to review the step-by-step registration process. So to demonstrate how to register an account on the DCR's licensing portal, I'm going to start from the DCR's landing page. So if you go to cannabis.lacity.org/, that's going to bring you to the City of LA's Department of Cannabis Regulations homepage. And registering on the DCR portal is necessary for individuals applying for a license and or for existing licensees who wish to maintain their license. You'll need to do the following to register for an account. You'll have to create a username and password, and you'll have to provide personal contact information and identification. So step one, from the DCR's licensing or from the DCR's homepage, you are going to click on the licensing tab. So we've got the licensing tab highlighted here in orange. When you click on the licensing tab, a drop-down menu will appear. And in the middle row, you'll see a menu option, apply for a license. Again, it's highlighted with an orange box. So you go licensing tab, and then the drop-down menu hits, and you'll click on apply for a license. And when you click apply for a license, you'll be brought to this page, which has a lot of text. And so you'll want to scroll down the page, and the teal button that says apply for a license, you'll click on that blue button titled click here to access the DCR's licensing portal. So once you click that button, you are at your destination, which is the DCR's licensing portal. My recommendation is to bookmark this page. I know I have a folder full of bookmarks from the City of LA's page. One of them is this portal login. Another one is the fees and fines page. We all want to know how much these licenses cost, right? So it's handy to have that available. The resource page, which has all the forms on it, I've got that one bookmarked. So if you're applying for a license in the City of LA, you are definitely going to be on this portal quite often, and you want to have easy access to it. So definitely a good one to bookmark. So from this page, once you get to the login page, if you have already registered as an individual, you'll enter your username and password and hit login. If you haven't registered yet, or you're registering a new individual or entity that's associated with your application, you'll hit one of two buttons at the top. It says register to apply for a license. So that's the top box that's highlighted with the orange box. And then at the bottom, there's also a second one that says create an account. Both of those allow you to create a new individual or a new business entity account on the portal. So click on either one of those and it's going to bring you to the next page, which is the login information. And this is where you're going to be asked to enter your username, your password, a unique email address, and a security question and answer. What is important to note about creating an account is each account needs a unique email address. So let's say you have your business entity and then you have 5 separate owners on your business entity. You'll need a separate unique email for each of those accounts. So you can't use one, info@cannabisbusiness.com for all of your accounts. You'll need to have a Courtney@cannabisbusiness.com account or Mike@cannabisbusiness.com. You need a unique email for every single account that you're registering, individual or entity. So once you have that information, your email address, security question and answer, etc., you'll go ahead and enter the information. You'll check the box to confirm you've read and accept these terms and that you're not a robot and hit continue. So this is just the last portion of the same web page that we just looked at. So again, you're just here entering all of the information, and at the bottom it says I've accepted the terms, you're not a robot, and continue. So once you've done that, that's when you're going to select on the next page whether you're registering an individual or an entity. So for an individual, you'll need to enter your full name, email address, phone number, mailing address, birth date, social security number, and then you click continue. If you are entering a business, you'll have to do the business name, the email address that you want to use for that business, a phone number, mailing address, and an FEIN or a federal employee identification number. So for the business, you have to have a registered business with the state, obviously, and with the IRS, you have to have your federal employer identification number before you're able to start an entity record on Excella. So then the second part, like we just went over, you're going to enter information as to if you're an individual or a business and hit continue, and that completes the registration process. It's pretty simple. So the account registration is complete and you're ready to log in now. So once you go back to the login page that you started at, you're ready to go. You've got your username and your password and you can log in. So let's take a look now that the registration is complete. What does it look like once you log in? So you've logged in, you entered your username and password, and now you are finding yourself at the dashboard page. So this is the first page you'll see once you log into your account. And let's take a look at how to manage the account. I think we had talked about earlier in this webinar that we want to figure out where to find your contact reference ID. That's the number that you need to reference when you're talking about your account. And so another thing that we'll take a look at as well is where you can find your personal information and update that. So if you click here, for account management, if you go up to the top in the right hand corner, it's highlighted in orange and it's a tab called account management. And so when you click on that, it'll bring you to the next page, which is going to show you your login information, such as your username and email associated with the account. And then in the second section, you'll see the ACA reference ID number. So that is what you want to keep handy. It's highlighted in orange right now on the screenshot. And so again, that's where you'll be able to locate your ACA reference ID number from this homepage. Once you log into the portal, you'll go to account management. Once you click on account management, it will show you your personal information, which you can update, as well as your contact reference ID number. So you've located your ACA reference ID number and you know where your contact information is. Next, I want to show you quickly how you can apply for a license. So when you're ready to apply for a license, you'll log into your account, and here we are, we're back at the dashboard. And when you are at the dashboard, what you'll do is click the Home tab, which is highlighted in orange. So click on the Home tab, and once you click on the Home tab, the next page you'll be brought to is this, where at the bottom, you'll see a blue box, a dark blue box, and these are the activities that you're able to do from the homepage. One is apply for a license or search for a license. If you wanted to look at another applicant's record, you can look that up here as well. It's not going to give you all of the details of their application, but you can look up other applicants that have been submitted. But most importantly, this is where you're going to apply for a license for yourself. So here you click on apply for a license. And that will basically start your record. You'll be able to apply for the pre-application review process. You're going to be able to apply for the temporary approval. You'll be able to apply for your modifications. Once you hit that tab, it'll open up those options to choose from, and you'll take it from there. So the next piece would be, once you've submitted your application, where do you find the records? So really quickly, from your account dashboard, you'll click on the tab titled My Records. Once you click on My Records, it's going to give you a list of all of your applications in process or your applications that have been submitted. And so right now I have one application. It hasn't been completed, but you'll see this is a cannabis business application. Depending on where you are at in the process, you'll be allowed to apply for specific processes of the application. So for me right now, I'm in the beginning stages and I need to register my business. So that's what this cannabis business application is here. If you've already registered your business and created a record for it, you would be allowed to do the pre-application process. Once you complete the pre-application process, when you go to apply for a license, it'll provide the annual application process for you. So you're only able to apply for what's relevant to your business and what you've previously completed. All right, before we head over to the Q&A, I just wanted to dish on the resources that are made available to you by the DCR, by also the California Department of Cannabis Control. So here, as I mentioned, we have the local cannabis license information, so application procedure resources, and the application documents and forms. Those are the ones that we took a look at. So it's the bulletin, the workflow chart, and then the lists of documents and forms you need to provide for each step in the licensing process. We also talked about how there's a couple things you can't submit through the portal, one of them being building permits and a certificate of occupancy. So I provided a link to where you can find more information on where you're going to submit your building permit applications and how you get your certificate of occupancy, which is going to be required in order to operate. The other piece is the business tax registration certificate. So the business tax registration certificate is also required to operate in the city of LA. That's what you'll utilize to report your monthly, quarterly, annual revenue and pay your local tax. You have to have that certificate in order to do so, to pay your taxes, but you also have to have that prior to operating in the city of LA. So there's a link to where you will make that registration and apply for that certificate. And then we've got the state license application information and resources as well. The state doesn't have as detailed of resources available. The city definitely has put a lot of time and effort into explaining and spelling out each of the steps, but there is a lot of good stuff available there as well. Obviously, there's specific forms that you're going to need to use for the state license application, and they have their own set of processes. So you'll want to familiarize yourself with that as well. And let's see. So let's get started with the question and answer. I know we've had some come in already, so we'll get started. So I see we've got someone asking about whether or not you're able to obtain a cultivation license in the city of Los Angeles. And so right now the DCR hopes to open up the cultivation license types in the future. And if CPA, a community plan area, has reached a finding of undue concentration for cultivation, applying for a public convenience necessity finding to allow DCR to process a cultivation application may be available. The goal is to reopen cultivation licenses, but it's really going to be at a future date. There's nothing firm right now, and so we'll keep you posted. So the next question here is, how much does a license cost? The DCR has a chart available, and it can be found in the municipal code section 104.19. 104.19. You can find this chart a couple places on the City of LA's website. Under the licensing tab that I showed you, the main page for the City of LA, if you go to the licensing tab, or if you go to the laws and policy tab, you'll see a section titled Cannabis Fees and Fines. That'll bring you to the chart in the municipal code that lists out all of the fees for the different application processes. So pre-application, that has its own fee. The temporary approval has its own fee. Annual license, that has its own fee. And so inspections have their own fees. That'll have a chart with each of the license processes, the steps to getting your full license, and it'll tell you the fees for each of those. There's also a chart for the state fees that can be found on the Department of Cannabis Control's website. And so that's cannabis.ca.gov. And that's going to be on the applicant tab. You're going to want to basically expect to pay somewhere around $10,000 combined for your local and state applications per activity. So that's if you're applying for cultivation and distribution, or if you're applying for delivery and manufacturing, $10,000 each. I would budget for, at minimum, for the fees for the city and state license. So next question was about applying for fee waivers or fee deferrals. And so you can apply with the California Department of Cannabis Control to have your license fee waived or deferred. It's super easy. If you take part in a local equity program like the City of LA's, you actually just need to submit an attestation form, and the fee waivers are available to you. It's important to note, so you'll submit the equity fee waiver to the state when you submit the application, but the fee waiver is only for the license fee. There's two fees available, or two fees that you have to pay. There's an initial application fee that you pay when you submit the application. And then there's the license fee that you pay at the end once your application has been approved. And the fee waiver is only for the license fee, the second part of that fee that you're going to pay. This initial fee, so for any of the applications you submit with the Department of Cannabis Control, so delivery, distribution, testing labs, it's just $1,000 fee up front. You will have to pay that $1,000 fee, but you don't have to pay the license fee at the end, which is based on the size of your company's and based on revenue. For cultivation licenses, it's actually 10%. You have to pay up front, and cultivation licenses are based on the size of your canopy. So they tend, the cultivation licenses to be, the application fee to be more than $1,000, depending on, especially if you're doing indoor, it's going to be more than $1,000. I think for a 5,000 square foot canopy, the initial application fee is $2,200. So you have to pay the $2,200, but you don't have to pay the other 90% of the fee at the end. So it's a good deal, and it's easy for you to apply for. Again, when you submit the application online through the Department of Cannabis Control's website, you'll select that you're an equity applicant. You'll submit a one-page form, attestation form that you sign that says you're a part of the City of LA's program, and they will waive the license fee. You only can use it for one license. If you apply for multiple licenses, if you apply for 2 or 3 licenses, again, they'll waive the fee for the first license, but the second 2, you can only defer those fees for 6 months. So you can't have all of your licenses. If you have 5 licenses or 3 licenses, you can't have the license fee waived for all of them. You can only have them waived for the first one, and then any other application proceeding, it's just a deferral. So you can defer the payment of the license fee for up to 6 months. So the next question was, what is the difference between submitting an application and filing an application? On Excella, you'll maybe have noticed on my small screenshot that when I submitted a license application and I hadn't completed it, it's the license number had a TMP on it. Once you submit a license and you hit the final submit button and you pay the fees, that TMP number turns into a different number. Once then the city reviews that application that has been submitted and deems it complete, then it's considered filed and it gets a separate number. So throughout the stages of the application process, the number will change. So when I start an application and it's a draft mode, I haven't submitted it, it's going to have one number. When I hit submit and pay the fees, it's going to turn into another number. And then once the city reviews and deems it's complete, all of the checklisted items and forms have been submitted, then it's going to change to a different number, and that's going to be your filed number. And then when your application is approved, the number also changes. So that's the difference between submitting an application and filing an application. The number will change, and that number of your application will change once the city has reviewed the application to make sure it's complete and everything has been submitted. So our next question is, can you operate multiple locations under the same license? And this question is from Chantel Michaels. So each location needs a separate license. So if you've got a retail location that's on Main Street, and then you've got your distribution that's on South Street, they need separate licenses. Every license activity wouldn't have its own license, but also if you have different locations, you're going to need to have separate licenses. Just waiting on some more questions to come in here. I know I've heard some folks ask questions about whether there is a limit to how many licenses you can apply for in the city of Los Angeles. And so for cultivation, you are limited to the number of licenses that you can apply for as an individual. So it's important to be informed on some of the caps for licenses. Okay, still waiting on a couple more questions to come in. So we've got another question from Chantel. And so that would be, what are some of the other benefits a social equity candidate who has a license is in operation can benefit from? And so from time to time, the city of LA will have grant programs available to social equity operators. We also have this program here where we've got webinars and resources available. I know there's pro bono office hours for specific social or for specific subject matter experts. So sometimes there's legal pro bono advice available. There are consultants like myself that can provide advice for your specific project. And those are one-on-one, like coaching sessions or office hours, we call them, kind of like talking to a mentor or professor. So the grant programs is a big one to keep your eye on. Each year, those are replenished. There's the state offers money for each of the local jurisdictions, and you have to apply for that grant money. So it just depends on how much money the state provides to the DCR for social equity, and also what programs they're looking to fund. I know last year the fee waivers were available for the social equity individual applicant qualifications. So if you were applying to just get your status as a social equity individual, those application fees were waived. That's also what the grant money can sometimes be used for, is to waive some fees, but it's usually, you got to check in and see what is currently available. It changes, not necessarily on an annual basis, but it's programmatic. And so you want to know and keep informed through the website as to what programs the DCR is currently operating and funding. The other piece, if you have a license and you're already operating, I assume you still are probably needing to transition from your temporary to an annual. And so there is quite a process to go through to get to your annual. There's another application process. And so obviously another benefit is going to be the priority processing of your application. So if you've got general public applying for licenses and you've got the social equity individual applicants applying for the annual license, your social equity applicants are going to go to the top of the line. So we've got a question about how long does it take to typically go through the licensing process? And it's really a case-by-case basis, but if you're moving through the steps at an average pace, once you lock your location down And so if you start your timeline from, the time you get your lease and you start the city's application process, you've got a couple different stages. You've got your local application that you need to go through with the Department of Cannabis regulations. You've got your building permit process, your building permits and construction phase, and then you have your state license application process. The three of those phases together probably take you anywhere from 1.5 to 2 years. But again, it's a case by case basis. If you are a single business owner and you're the only person that has to authorize decisions, make payments, paying your contractors or getting things processed for your applications can be quite a tangled mess when you got 7 people. But if you have one, it makes it a lot smoother. So something like that factors into how long it's going to take. You can move really swiftly. It just really depends on your team and how easily and swiftly decisions are made, and authority and power for people that are in charge. So I've seen people go as fast as like 1.5 years, but sometimes it can take people 3 years to get started. So it's really just making sure when you start, you've got clear roles and a clear understanding of the process, and someone who's really taking charge of that process for you. And then obviously like the access to funds and being able to swiftly get things paid and moving. I always tell people that, the response time that you take to get back to the city for something or to get back to the state, if you're responding and providing whatever documents or information they're asking you for in 3 days, I feel like you kind of get that reciprocated. That's not necessarily how it works. Obviously, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but my rule of thumb is like, if you're going to respond swiftly, you'll usually get swift responses in return, and things just move faster. So it's just about keeping that pace up with your application, and just being really communicative. Even if you don't have the response, at least telling your licensing analyst or whomever is requesting more information, I'm working on it. I hope to have it to you next week, and then just keeping them in the loop as to where you're at. All that kind of stuff really helps keep your application at the top of the pile and moving along. Another question came in around a date for the public convenience and necessity process. The public convenience and necessity process is available for licenses that have a cap. So cultivation has a cap, retail has a cap. And essentially, it's not a process that's open or available to the public, but it's been mapped out, and there's a specific way you would apply for a public convenience and necessity. And what it does is it provides a pathway to make a public claim that, the convenience and necessity of having another cultivation license in a specific community plan area, or another retail license in the community plan area that has reached its cap, it's reached undue concentration. This provides a process for you to do so, and for you to get your applications considered where there is a cap. So we talked about that earlier in the presentation about how you would apply for a public convenience and necessity through this application portal. It's not made available yet. There hopefully will be more information on that coming later in the year, but it would be made available for folks to apply for a cultivation license, even though all of the community plan areas have reached the cap. And it would provide a path forward. Not saying it's going to be an easy path. It's definitely, you're going to have to prepare and make presentations and have some hearings, et cetera, to make the case for it. But it definitely opens the door for opportunity for social equity applicants, newer equity applicants, to apply for a cultivation license. Just as a reminder, there will be a recording available of this webinar on the DCR's website once it's been reviewed, and it'll be up on the DCR's website, hopefully the next week or two. We do have a couple of webinars coming up as well that we'll want to make sure you're aware of. I will be doing one in 2 weeks that is on available license types. So we'll be taking a look at what licenses are available in the city of Los Angeles. And there's many more webinars coming up. So take a look at the schedule. I know there's an email that's been circulated that has a list. There's pretty much one every week. So lots of webinars coming up. So another question was around, will I be able to open a retail location in my neighborhood of choice? And so this question kind of comes back to the retail round 2 lottery that was done in late 2022. But if you were selected in the lottery from 2022, you'll be able to submit a pre-application review record in the community plan area that you have your business located in. If that community plan area has reached undue concentration, that's where the public convenience and necessity process comes into play. So again, if you were selected as a lottery winner in 2022 and you have a location that is in a community plan area that hasn't reached undue concentration for retail licenses, you can go ahead and submit an application for that location and for your business. But if you have located a location for a retail business and it's in a community plan area that has reached undue concentration, you'll have to secure a public convenience and necessity finding from the city council in order to submit an application to the Department of Cannabis Regulation. And like I said, the public convenience and necessity application process isn't open right now, but it will hopefully reopen in the near future. So with that, we have reached the end of our webinar. I just want to thank everyone who's attended this informative webinar offered by the City of Los Angeles Department of Cannabis Regulation. And this webinar recording will be found on the DCR's website, which is cannabis.lacity.org. If you have any questions on accessing your account, please email dcr.sep@lacity.org. Again, that's dcr.sep@lacity.org. Thanks again for joining. I hope to see you in 2 weeks for the available license types webinar, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you.